This passage is about the possibility or theories or scientific research into the existence of life millions of years ago. Let's read it, summarize it, and then go to the questions. During a period of intense cold millions of years ago, almost all of the earth may have been covered in glaciers. We don't really know what was there, but this is theory, almost certain that most of the earth may have been covered in glaciers, known as the snowball earth. The whole earth is covered in ice, so snowball. This time frame cut off oceans from the sun's life and created conditions far less hospitable than those of the last ice age that ended some 10,000 years ago. So the snowball age was very cold and inhospitable to life. But now, a new study published last week in the Journal of Natural Communications is changing the idea of how the planet looked during this frigid era. New research is giving new insights into what life was in this frigid snowball era of the Earth. Rather than being nearly entirely blanketed in glaciers, the study posits, hypothesizes, proposes that the Earth may have had sections that were wetter than previously thought. So there might be sections of the Earth that had wetness or water rather than ice. By analyzing prehistoric sediment, scientists suggest that open oceans were present significantly north of the equator during the snowball Earth, and some organisms could have survived within them. So, what did they studied? Prehistoric sediments, and from the study of prehistoric sediments, scientists indicate and suggest that there might have been open oceans north of the equator, and some organisms could have survived in the open oceans, not the solid ice glaciers, open oceans with water in it. The key finding of the study is that open water, ice free conditions existed in the mid latitude oceanic regions during the waning stage of the Marinoan Ice Age. Now, this is a name that keeps coming, so just let's remember it as the Marinoan Ice Age. They believe that there were open water or ice free conditions in mid latitudes of the uh, Earth. The Marinoan Ice Age, which spanned 634 to 654 million years ago, was one of the two snowball events that took place during the appropriately named Cryogenian period. So there were two snowball eras in the Cryogenian period. If there's a question on this, we'll come back. Had the ocean's surface been globally frozen over, it would have restricted oxygen and nutrients from reaching the depths and made it difficult for some organisms to persist. So the author is saying that the Marinoan Ice Age existed at a particular time. If during the Marinoan Ice Age the ocean surface had been totally frozen globally, it would have restricted oxygen and nutrients from reaching the depths, and it would have made it difficult for some of the marine organisms to persist, to survive. But some scientists believe that life forms did survive. So, one group of scientists say, look, it was totally frozen over, so no oxygen, no nutrients, so there would have been no life forms. But now scientists say that some life forms did survive. Fossils from this period indicate that tiny organisms such as algae, which need sunlight and open water, lived both before and after the snowball Earth. You have to envision some sort of refuge where these algae can survive. So they did find that during the snowball era, some algae and some life forms did survive. To explore how life might have eked out an existence during such frozen conditions, the researchers analyzed a prehistoric layer of black shale. What is black shale? A type of sediment rich in organic matter that would have been under the ocean during the Marinoan Ice Age. The shale came from the Shenonja National Forest in South China. In the Marinoan sediment, the team found fossils of algae as well as nitrogen compound that suggest that the waters were oxygenated, that they had water had oxygen in them. Some past climate research had suggested that the places at low latitudes, 5 to 15 degrees, perhaps 20 to 30 degrees away from the equator, were not frozen for parts of snowball Earth as per the paper. This is one of the findings. That these mid latitudes, 5 to 15 degrees, 20 to 30 degrees, probably had water, were probably not totally frozen. But the shale in the new study might have resided between 30 to 40 degrees north of the equator. So earlier scientific research says 5 to 15 degrees, 20 to 30 degrees away from the equator were not frozen. New study says even 30 to 40 degrees north of the equator, means even more north, more towards the poles and less towards the equator, there might not have been totally frozen, meaning that open water could have existed at much higher latitudes than previously thought. Okay. According to Song, until now, ice-free areas have only been identified in peri-equatorial areas, closer to the equator, peri-equatorial areas. But patchy ice-free areas may have existed much more widely. Still, Paul Hoffman, a Harvard University geologist who contributed to the snowball Earth theory, is not totally convinced by the findings. Which of the following can be inferred about the Marinoan Ice Age? Okay, the Marinoan Ice Age, we've learned enough. If need, we'll go back if we have a doubt. The Marinoan Ice Age was the first of the two snowball events to take place during the Cryogenian period. Did he say it was the first of the two snowball events? The Marinoan Ice Age had a shorter span. Did he tell us anything about the span of the Marinoan Ice Age compared to the pre-Cryogenian age? Nothing has been said about the pre-Cryogenian ages and the span. So this is definitely wrong. Okay. The ocean surface had not been totally frozen and had some oxygen and nutrients to allow organisms to survive. That is what later studies have found out. So now we know C can be inferred, so we don't have to really check back on it. If you want, you can. The waning stage of the ice age was entirely blanketed in glaciers. It was thought that it was entirely blanketed in glaciers, but studies have shown there might have been wetter regions which had open free water, right? Ice free water. Therefore, the correct answer is C. Which of the following, if true, weakens the theory of the existence of open waters during the ice age? So what was the theory of the existence of open waters? They said, look, there was life, and because they found in the sediments during the Marinoan era, they found sediments, and they said these sediments belong to the Marinoan era, and in these sediments we have found that there existed life forms, algae and other life forms. From this, the algae and life form could not have existed had there not been water. So in this snowball era, maybe the entire planet was not a frozen ball. There were patches of open waters. Correct? So if you have to weaken the theory, how will you weaken it? When you say that these life forms may have come from some other place of water, not open ice-free waters as suggested in the passage. Correct? That not the entire glacier, there were parts which was open water, which was free from ice. So you have to counter that. Let's see. Many scientists believe that it's more likely the fossilized algae lived in pools atop glaciers instead of in open waters. That weakens it. The whole thing was found in glacier. The whole thing was covered in glacier. The earth was a snowball. totally blanketed in glaciers. But on top of the glaciers, certain parts, there might have been small pools of water for whatever reason that has not been given. If true, so we just have to take it. And they were not there in the depths of the ocean as suggested, where there were areas in the ocean which were open water. This was just a small part of the glacier itself which had some life forms. So that would weaken. Let's look at B. Fossils from this period indicates that tiny organisms such as algae lived both before and after the snowball era, but they do not counter the open water theory. We have to only counter the open water theory. The fact that algae survived is what made scientists suggest that there was the existence of open water areas. B does not challenge the open water theory. It just says there was life. It's just a statement on the existence of life forms, which doesn't. Open water conditions existed in mid-latitude oceanic regions during the waning. This would not weaken. This strengthens. A new study is changing the idea of how the planet looked during the cryogenic era. Now, the other options are really easy, which helps us to zero in on A as the correct answer. Which of the following can be inferred about the findings of the Marinoan sediment? They found something in the Marinoan sediment. What did they find? They found algae and nitrogen compounds. The nitrogen compounds suggest that the waters were oxygenated, right? Those are the findings. The Marinoan sediment refutes the claim of scientists that the fossils that were found were that of algae. No. The Marinoan sediment found algae, found nitrogenated compounds or nitrogen compounds or something. So it doesn't refute. The Marinoan sediment proves the claim that waters in the prehistoric area were not oxygenated. Option says they were oxygenated. It shows that life could have existed underwater. That is the scientist's conclusion. Therefore, that's the correct answer. Life could not have existed contradicts the theory. So the Marinoan sediment, using the Marinoan sediment, scientists say they found existence of life forms such as algae. They found nitrogen compounds. Conclusion was water was oxygenated. Conclusion was there must have been patches of open water where these life forms existed. Had it been total ice, there wouldn't have been oxygen, there wouldn't have been nutrients, there wouldn't have been any life forms. Right? So C is a correct answer. Which of the following can be concluded from the penultimate paragraph of the passage? The paragraph before the ultimate or the last paragraph. Let us go back to the penultimate paragraph of the passage. This is the penultimate paragraph of the passage. Some past climate research had suggested that places at low latitudes, 5 to 15, 20 to 30, remember equator is 0, so 5 to 15, 20 to 30 away from the equator were not frozen for parts of the snowball earth period. So there were certain periods in the snowball earth period where these latitudes such as 5 to 15 and these low latitudes 20 to 30 degrees above the equator, in these latitudes there were parts of the earth which were not frozen. This is the earlier research had suggested, but the shale in the new study might have resided between 30 to 40 degrees. The shale is where they found evidence of algae and nitrogen compounds. The shale that they got from that area in China showed that the shale might have existed 30 to 40 degrees north of the equator. So if the shale was situated 30 to 40 degrees north of the equator, what does it mean? Life forms existed 30 to 40 degrees north of the equator. If life forms existed 30 to 40 degrees north of the equator, we can infer that there were open waters in those latitudes. So that's our inference. Let's look at This is the inference. Open water could have existed at much higher altitudes than previously thought. So, what can you conclude from the penultimate paragraph? A rephrasing of that line. The new study substantiate the claims of the earlier study on the existence of open water at low latitudes. No, it substantiates or it reveals new information or new possibilities that there was life at higher altitudes, right? So, not one. The new study suggests that open water could not have existed at lower latitudes. It didn't say could not have existed. It just said it could have existed at higher latitudes as well. Maybe it existed at lower and higher also. It didn't say anything about lower latitudes. So, B is out. The new study shows that it's likely that open water existed at higher altitudes than in higher latitudes than that indicated by previous research. Yes, previous research put it as 5 to 15, but this is putting it as 30 to 40 above the equator. Therefore, C is a correct answer.